One thing I wanted to show off before we got started was how I'm hardening off my seedlings. That just means that they've been used to growing inside under certain light conditions, under certain environmental controlled conditions. And in order to get them ready to survive outside with different amounts of light, often more intense from the sun, and then wind and rain and things like that, it's important to harden them off. So for the last couple days, I've been moving my seedlings that are getting ready to go on the ground outside. On day 1, an hour, day 2, 2 hours, so on and so forth. So these are going to spend about 5 hours out here. And then after that, maybe tomorrow, I'll see if they're ready to go into the ground. If you skip this process, your seedlings may be susceptible to shock. Their leaves might burn, and they have a less likely chance of survival. So this is an important process if you're starting seeds inside. All right, let's get to the main point of this video. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to my garden. It's Sunday, May 1st, and it's in the mid-50s today with total overcast, and I'm enjoying life. The purpose of today's video is to give some updates about our growing spaces and then also do a little bit of work in each growing space. So it's going to be a combination of a spring garden tour and a little bit of garden maintenance. It's been a minute since we've put out a video. We attempted to put out a video 2 weeks ago, but we lost all of the footage. That happens sometimes. You know, I'm new to videography, and our external hard drive where I store all the footage decided to stop working, which means I've also lost all my footage to date. Now, as a new videographer, I've learned my lesson. I'm going to be backing up my videos in multiple different places so that if it's gone one place, it's not gone forever. So I'm going to do my best to update you all with that knowledge that I've lost everything previously. So, another message I wanted to share that's important to me before we begin today's garden tour and garden maintenance is this is a lot of work. Matt and I spend many hours on the weekends putting our work into the yard, into our gardens, and into our landscaping. I guess I'm sharing this because I have had these gardens planned for many months now. So during like the off-season, winter months, that's what I do is I plan my gardens, and I have these dreams of these beautiful spaces. So now that the weather is nice, I could either sit inside and keep dreaming, or I can use my free time to actually make these dreams come true. And so I'm so happy to share with you all how far we've come and even share some more about what's yet to come. So I think we'll get started here in this space. It's on the southernmost part of our property, what is technically considered our backyard, and that is our raised bed garden area with some grow bags and containers. So this is the second season of using our raised bed area as a growing space. In fact, the last time I updated my channel, we were working in this raised bed specifically. So it is coming along so nicely. We've got spring crops up front, I'll show you in a moment. And then look at our onions, they're doing so great. We've got whites here, reds towards the back, and then potatoes in the very back, and everything has come up really great. So let's take a look. So starting here in the south side of the garden, I've got our spring crops. Now, unfortunately, this part of the garden did get a little bit of pest damage. I'm thinking some squirrels dug through my seedlings, but we still have a decent amount left. We've got lettuce, carrots, spinach, radishes, and beets. So those are all doing really well. I could probably start harvesting from this lettuce if I wanted to. Maybe that spinach plant over there. So this is about a 2x4 dedicated space to spring crops. And then our onions are doing amazing. They've put on so much growth since the last time we checked in with each other, and so little maintenance is needed for these plants as well. I just need to make sure that they're watered properly, Luckily, we've gotten enough rain where I really haven't had to water them as much. And then they were already fed when I planted them because we have compost in here loaded with nutrients, and I added some fertilizer because these types of plants are heavy feeders. We want to make sure there's enough nutrients in this growing space so that they can grow and give us a wonderful harvest. Moving back to the north side of the garden, we have our potatoes, and it's so funny because you can see where we put each potato specifically. I did about 8 inches between, so this is another 2 by 4 planting space. You can kind of cram them a little bit closer in raised beds, so that's what I decided to do, about every 8 inches or so. If I wanted to, I could hill these up, meaning just basically bury the green growth that they've put on top and add more soil, but I think I might just leave it. I don't know. We'll see. But so far, so good for potatoes and onions. Right next to this bed, we have its twin. Now this one is empty. I'm saving this for my tomatoes and pepper plants. So those are hardening off as we speak, getting ready to go in the ground, hopefully in the next week or 2. And because tomatoes nor peppers climb, but I've got this beautiful trellis, I have planted at least 3 seed planting areas of a plant called Black-Eyed Susan vine, and those are really aggressive, prolific plants. So they're going to climb up this trellis and just fill it with beautiful yellow and white blooms. So I'm really excited for that. Next to my tomato and pepper bed, we've got some perennials coming back up, Coreopsis and different varieties of coneflower. Couple of hostas because this area is shaded from the fence. But then here's a new bed we're working on. I had canna lilies in this area last season, tons of canna lilies. And then in the fall, I replaced them with these allium bulbs. A lot of bulbs you can plant in fall, including alliums and tulips and daffodils. And so that's what's putting on so much growth here. And you can tell they're getting ready to bloom. So they're all getting ready to open up. And these are late spring bloomers. And then if we take a closer look, this is also the spot where we scattered poppy seeds. So that's an example of a poppy seedling. That's a weed. Lots of weeds in here too because there's no ground cover. But tons of different poppy seedlings are sprouting up as well. If I wanted to weed in here, I definitely could because I can easily tell the difference between a poppy seedling and a weed. It's pretty tight in here, so I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. And eventually we would like to extend the border so that it includes this extension of the raised bed area as well. So alliums and poppies growing in here. Back to the onion bed, if I scooch this way in this area, you'll see my container and grow bag growing space, cold frame over there. And so let's just do a quick update on how things are going. Peas are looking great, and I put some chicken wire in here so they have a way to climb up. And then this grow bag, we just put some bush bean seeds in there. Pole bean seeds in here, so I'll need a similar trellising system in this bed as I have in my peas. And in this bag, I have okra seeds. And then here is a grow bag of potatoes, which are also coming up really nicely. It'll be much easier to harvest the potatoes in here because we just get to dump out the bag and see what we find. Blueberry plants in grow bags here as well. And then each of these small containers has different herb seeds. So I've got chamomile seeds here. This one's empty because I'm waiting on my oregano seedlings from inside to be ready. Chives in here, which we've already harvested from. Parsley seeds in here. Cilantro seeds in here, dill seeds in here, and these are all direct sowed. Thyme seeds in here and basil seeds in here. So these are all of the herbs that we imagine cooking with this year. cooking with and preserving. The final 2 containers I dedicated to zucchini. So zucchini is a pretty large plant, but they only need about a foot of container space in diameter. So I decided to try 1 zucchini plant per container. In fact, is that a seedling? No. And then I mulched over the soil in each container. The mulch serves a number of purposes. First of all, weed suppression, but also moisture control. I feel like I have to water less with mulch on top because it retains the moisture much better. Unfortunately, my perennials are not as lucky on this side. The Black-Eyed Susan came back fine. I think this is another type of coneflower. Those are weeds we have to get up. But then I had, I think like a milkweed here and 1 other coneflower there, and those didn't come back unless they're just being lazy. But I think this might be dead. So that'll get to be replanted. Not a huge deal. To finish this space, I wanted to show off some strawberry beds I'm fostering for a friend. They're doing okay. In fact, look at this. We've got our first bloom. So strawberry plants bloom these cute little flowers before they make their strawberries. So that's my tour of my raised bed area. I'm actually now realizing I don't really need to do any maintenance here. If I wanted to weed, I could, but I think I'm just ready to move on to show you something I'm really excited about. So I planned this garden on 8/31 of last year. We call it the row crop garden, and voila! Oh my gosh, this is what I mean when I'm talking about things that you can dream of actually coming into reality. So this new space is 17 feet wide and 40 feet long, so much more square footage. It's mostly going to be flowers. So a quick review, my chickens are yelling at me because they want to come out. This first row, which is on the south side of the garden, is all going to be food, so we'll take a look at that in a second. And then each row, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they will all be flowers. So this is mostly going to serve as a cut flower garden, so I can continue to make my own arrangements throughout the summer. A quick design note, and I implement this design rule in my raised beds as well, because here in the northern hemisphere, the sun tends to stay on the south side. On the south side of the garden, you want your short plants, and then you can increase height plant taller and taller as you get to the north side of your garden. And that's just because for my tallest plants here, which could be like 10, 12 feet tall, I don't want them casting a shadow on anything that I'm trying to grow behind them. So they get to go on the north side of the garden. And then my shorties get to live over here. So let me do a quick note about how we've prepared this space before I show you what I've got in it so far. So in addition to planning this growing space way back in the fall, Matthew and I also rented a tiller to just start breaking it up. Now, I have thoughts about tilling, and I have a lot of knowledge now about soil ecology, and it is important to let your soil do its thing. There are so many important organisms living in your soil that improve its overall health, and by tilling, you're disrupting their ecology, and you kind of have to start all over. With that being said, I do understand the importance of an initial till, and so we got that out of the way. I'm thinking otherwise this is going to be a no-till space. So we did till in the fall, and then come spring, the real work began. We edged this growing space 17 feet wide, 40 feet long, with a little edging tool that I picked up. We added some cardboard to just kind of suppress weeds where the growth was a little heavier. And then on top of that, we just added a couple inches of compost that we had delivered in bulk from our local landscape recycling center. And so this garden and this bed is ready to go. And what's nice about using cardboard instead of landscape fabric is that it'll break down and add more nutrients. Each row is spaced 3 feet apart, So that's about the recommendation when you're planting in rows, is about 36 inches apart. So 1 foot in, we have our first row, and then there's 36 inches between each row from there. And to make sure that I don't need to enter from the sides, we have a half-point walkway where nothing will be planted, and we put down some pavers. So let's start with my shorty row over here. That's going to be food. This shorty row will be flowers, and then we'll make it up to my plants and what we have over here, including the T-post and the cattle panel that we put in for our vining plants and for our tall plants that might need some staking. Starting in this first section of row 1, I planted some kale seeds. Multiple came up here, so I'll have to do some thinning, but these look to be about 12 or 18 inches apart, I forget. And so we'll have about 6 feet worth of kale. First time growing it. The next 6 feet is dedicated to cabbage, and this is a really great way to show the difference between something that I started earlier inside, these 3 spaced about 12 inches apart, and then direct sow seeds. So you can see this one is way ahead of this one. I'm noticing a little pest damage, so I'm gonna have to keep an eye on this. I wonder who's been munching. So then we've got 3 that are a little more ahead of these 3, but that's called succession planting, just kind of making sure that I'll have cabbage at different harvest times instead of having it all ready to be harvested at the same time. Definitely some weeds need to come out of here. All right. And then our last 6 feet of planting before the half-point walkway is cauliflower. And so these get to be spaced 18 inches apart because they're a little bit bigger plants. So I also started these early on, so they're a little bit more ahead of schedule. And hopefully we'll get a sooner harvest. And you can see the difference between this that I started early and this that I direct sowed, but this one is not doing great. So I'm gonna see if I have another cauliflower transplant that can take its space. And then we have our walkway here, and we continue our planting space here. The next 6 feet is dedicated to broccoli, also spaced 18 inches apart because they get to be pretty good in size. So I also started these ahead of time, so I transplanted these into the ground. I made an oopsie. This was supposed to be celery, but instead I did another 6 feet of cauliflower. Hopefully I can find a good way to preserve it, but these are doing really great. And then the last 6 feet in this row is more okra seeds. There's a dish at one of my favorite restaurants in town. The restaurant is called Watson's, that includes pickled okra. And so that dish inspired me to plant it and pickle it myself. Hi, girls. I know you want out. Maybe later. All right, back at the beginning here in row 2, this is where my flower production starts. And the first 6 feet in row 2 is dedicated to Calendula. They are a spring blooming flower, so I knew I could get them in sooner than others. And I direct sowed these 12 inches apart. I'll have to do some thinning because they came up pretty nicely. And these will put on beautiful yellow blooms, so I'm excited to see those. They seem to be doing great so far. The next 6 feet in row 2 is dedicated to a plant called Nasturtium. I also direct sowed these, looks like maybe every 6 inches apart, and I just find out that information on the back of the seed packet. Lots of good info there. We'll also get to do some thinning because I have multiple successful germinations, and these will be beautiful. I just love the leaf structure on these plants, and they're edible. I don't know, might be a little adventurous. Try some out. That's all I have in row 2 so far. So let me pop over to row 3. So while these will stay under 24 inches in height, this row is dedicated to plants that might get like 36 inches in height because we want to go short and get taller as we go north in garden spaces. So this first 6 feet, I just direct sowed these a couple days ago and added some compost on top and some starter fertilizer, is a variety of Zenia called Dwarf Zenia. So these are gonna be limited to about 36 inches tall, wonderful, easy, cut and come again flower. So these will make it into lots of my flower arrangements. The next 6 feet is dedicated to an herb that I also just direct sowed a couple days ago called Borage. Now this is an herb, but it didn't make it into my herb container garden because I'm actually growing it for its flowers. I'm very curious to see how this does. It's edible, right? It's an herb and it's supposed to have a cucumbery taste. So while I'm growing it for flowers, I also may have to try it in some dishes. We'll see. And then the final 6 feet in row 3 that I have planted so far is a flower called Nigella. Really unique flower and leaf structure. And once again, after I direct sowed, I added a layer of compost and some starter fertilizer. So that's it for what's in the ground so far. But check out these cattle panel fences with T-posts. Most of this was bought secondhand, like on Facebook Marketplace, or just kind of got it for free when I saw it on curbs. But the reason we have these last 2 rows 5 and 6, with these structures is because I have vining flowers scheduled for this section here, and then any other of this fencing will be dedicated to really tall plants that might need to be staked after a little bit. So I'm glad we got this in the ground now versus later after I realized that certain things might need some staking. The only maintenance I think I want to do here, since we're here in the row crop garden, is a little bit of weeding, and then maybe I can put some seeds into the ground to show you how that process works when you're direct sowing. Got a bunch of weeds, gonna drop them off in my compost pile, and then I'll show you how I put seeds in here. All right, so I find myself here in row 5 on this half of the garden, so our halfway walkway is right in front of me, and the materials I'm using to show you how I direct sow in my row crop garden: kneeling pad, why not? I've got my seeds. We're gonna put in sweet pea and morning glory. Those are both climbing plants, which is why they'll need the cattle panel, something to grow on. I already made my labels, a tape measure so I can space the seeds apart according to the seed packet's instructions, and then just a little hand shovel. Oh, and biotone starter fertilizer. So for this sweet peas, this is a mixed color sweet pea, 65-day maturity. They grow up to 6 feet tall. I'll want to plant them 2 inches below the soil and 6 inches apart. The other variety of sweet pea I have, called the Bijou mix, B-I-J-O-U, a little bit shorter, 18 inches tall, but it still needs something to climb on. I'll plant those a 1/2 inch deep, also 6 inches apart, and those will pop up in about 10 days. And then my morning glory, this is called a tall mixed color variety. Let's see, I'll plant it a 1/4 inch in the ground, also spacing 6 feet apart, and they can get up to 10 feet tall. So starting here, this is the beginning of the planting space. I will mark off every 6 inches. I'll just run the tape measure down the length of this section of my garden. And I will put about a teaspoon or tablespoon of starter fertilizer in each planting space. And then this just gives it the extra boost of nutrients that it needs, in addition to the nutrients that we put in here with the compost. This is a 4-3-3 organic fertilizer. And then I'll probably put about 2 seeds in each planting space just to make sure that I have successful germination every 6 inches. I'm gonna go ahead and spread these out 6 feet apart because I'm dedicating 6 feet of growing space to every plant that I put in the ground. I think I'll do a sweet pea, morning glory, and sweet pea. So I'm starting with the sweet pea bijou mix. And one thing that a tip that they recommend on the seed packet is nicking the outside coating of a sweet pea will allow rapid hydration of the seeds and speed germination. I've never done that, so I've chosen to skip that part, but just wanted to point out that that is a tip. So I'll go ahead and make a planting space here. This is the one that only needs to be buried 1/2 inch, so just a little well there. And I'm gonna go ahead and put in a little bit of my biotone starter fertilizer, just a sprinkle. Mix that in with the soil a little bit, and then pop 2 seeds, direct sow, cover those up, and then once I'm done planting, I will make sure that this is nice and watered. All right, let's speed up and do the rest of these. So that about does it here for the tour of this growing space and how I direct sow seeds into this growing space. Putting transplants out that I've started inside isn't all that different, so maybe I can capture that on another day, just in case you want to see. Let's move on to our next growing space. I might wash my hands first. That about does it for the tour and update about our new row crop garden. On our way to the next planting space, I have to show off another set of bulbs I planted in the fall. These are all hyacinths, and it was a mix. So you can see we have various shades of purple and even some whites in here. I just love how these look. This is by a bird feeding station, but as you can see, we have no bird feeders up because of the avian flu. Illinois Department of Natural Resources suggested taking them down to prevent the spread, at least until the end of the month. So we're just following those rules, unfortunately. This will eventually be a garden space. You can see grass and weeds are making their way in here. So eventually we'll edge this out in a nice circle around this mature tree. And so we can have a nice shade garden. But here it is for now. And I think they're just so pretty. Let's get a little closer. And these should come back every year. Matt picked these out. All right, so we're done in this part of the yard. We're heading around to that side of the house. So this is a shade perimeter garden that that I started last year with some hostas and coral bells mostly. But then also in the fall, we planted 100 bluebell bulbs. So those are the ones you see here. That's a hosta coming back up for us. I love having different varieties of hosta. And then of course we put a new layer of mulch, but as you can see, some weeds are coming through. That's okay. We'll go ahead and weed those in a second. So we have hosta, bluebells, more hosta. These were split from my parents' yard, so these are great to split and give away to friends, whereas I bought that from a nursery and put that in myself. Parents' hosta, new hosta. Oh, that one has some damage. Who's been munching on my plants? Hosta. I did have 2 coral bells here, but those didn't come back, unlike those 2. Those did, so that's kind of strange. More hosta and bluebells. The bluebells haven't put on their blooms yet, but they will soon. Hosta and 2 coral bells. Coral bells are a great choice for your shade gardens to add some color. So that's where we are now for this garden. I love that it's putting on some growth for us, and this is full shade until we turn to the front. Look at that view. So much color here, and I would consider this a full sun space, even though it just gets afternoon sun. That afternoon sun is hot, so things do really well up here. I had canna lilies in here last year and planted a bunch of bulbs in the fall. You can see our daffodils are just starting to fade out. But let me see if we can get a pretty look at one right here. Yes, see, look at that. Gorgeous daffodils. And then, you know, these are a little bit older. These blooms are spent. And I will deadhead spent blooms, let the greens kind of finish up as well. And then we just cut that back to the ground and they'll come back every year. Same thing with our tulips. So this is a variety that came with both orange and yellow blooms. And I think they just are just a wonderful bright spot in this area. My grass plant is starting to wake up a little bit. And then we have the same thing mirrored over here. I also recently put in some window boxes, so let's take a look at that. Some viola, some pansies, some cabbage. Wonderful spring container. We've got some neighbors mowing, so sorry about the noise. But the show must go on. Here is another garden that I planned in the fall. Here's our house. Isn't that a lovely drawing? And then here's our sidewalk, 32 feet long, and I just wanted something flanking the sides of the sidewalk. So here we are. Now, some of the work that we've done so far includes, well, I put these tulip bulbs in the ground in the fall, so they're just budded up and getting ready to open for us soon. Matt did most of the work here other than that, and that is putting down landscape fabric and mulch. Now you can see some of the grass and weeds is starting to make its way here, kind of peeking up around the landscape fabric, so that will require some maintenance, but I'm thinking with a weed whacker we should be able to manage that okay. And once these tulips open up their blooms, it's just going to be a wonderful show. You can see some of the pink right there. This is going to be a pink and white mix that lead up to our front door. So why don't I go ahead and take a minute and go ahead and pull out some of these weeds. That worked out nice. I did this side by hand at first, but my knuckles were getting cut up on the sidewalk. And that took, what, a minute? This is not a permanent fix because the roots are still intact. But I think every time we mow or weed whack, we'll just get to come up and down the sidewalk here to maintain these gardens. Something else worth noting is the pavers that Matt put in, just to kind of create a neat and tidy border on each side. We could definitely use some more mulch in this garden bed, but we're in luck because we got that delivered in bulk as well, and we have plenty left over. Before I take you over there, which is the last garden space I wanted to tour, just a couple more things I think are worth showing off. First of all, oh my word, this crabapple tree is in its full glory right now. These beautiful white blooms, and the smell is amazing. Let's take a closer look. Look at how beautiful that is. Oh, I could stay here and just soak up the glory. And then if we move over here, kind of in the middle of our front yard, we've got a lilac. And these blooms are just opening up. This will also be wonderful to look at. I pruned this back really hard after it bloomed last season, and it looks great. A couple didn't come back. That's okay. I'll prune this again once it's stopped. Once the blooms are done, you get to prune lilacs after blooming, and then they'll put on more growth throughout the spring and summer, and then they actually bloom on that new growth. We've got more lilacs in there as well that'll treat the same. Okay, final growing space over here. So here were the plans I drew up last fall. I guess it goes this way. Here's our fence. Here's the property line that's also fenced. And then I sketched out a really gentle curve as a border of this garden. And here's where we're at now. This is our fence. Here's the property line. Here's our gentle border. Using the same pavers as the sidewalk garden. And it doesn't look like much right now. And it's kind of not, but it's a work in progress. So let me show you what we've got so far. In fact, this was the video that I tried to record 2 weeks ago and lost all the footage. So I'll do a brief update if I can before we get into more details. So here's the paver border. And then here's the growing space. I'm calling this the front shade garden. And so far, I've got about 20 caladium bulbs in the ground here. Those are really beautiful foliage plants that do well in shade. Here are some tulips that I planted in the fall that look gorgeous. And then the bright green foliage you see peeking up here, like there for example, those are all new hostas that I put in the ground. So we do have some plants. Now the problem is what do I do with all this grass and weeds that are creeping into this space? Well, the answer to that is TBD. You can also see 3 planting spaces here. I put astilbe, A-S-T-I-L-B-E. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Another great shade plant that'll provide some color as well. Otherwise, I refreshed the mulch around the tree rings. This will be an interesting experiment because under the mulch here, I just have cardboard. You can see some peeking out to act as a weed barrier, but there's also a lot of grass growing around the ring. So those are the results of that so far, versus I put landscape fabric under this one, much less grass. Pros and cons, landscape fabric is not compostable, whereas the cardboard is. So let me just kind of clean up that space really quick. Still don't have a solution for what to do with all the grass growing in this space. We may just get to lay landscape fabric down and cut holes where we're going to plant. Haven't decided yet. But in the meantime, I've got some more perennial shade plants to put in here, and I think that'll be it for today. Okay, last thing of the day. Here are the plants that I'm gonna go ahead and put in today. There's 15 plants in this package. We bought it from Costco. In fact, what we've put in here so far is also from Costco, the caladiums and the hostas. So we've got, we've got 6 more astilbe, A-S-T-I-L-B-E, and then 9 more hosta. And I really appreciate this package because it gives you a garden plan and like spacing and care tips and things. But here's what they look like. So 2 varieties of astilbe and 2 varieties of hosta to create a beautiful perennial shade garden. Other materials that I'm using today is this bulb auger, and even though it says it's for bulbs, it's great for planting anything that just needs a small hole and quick. This thing gets the job done for sure. Brought my kneeling pad back out, some more Biotone starter fertilizer. When we were putting seeds in the row crop garden, I only did about a tablespoon or so per planting hole. This will be a little bit more because these are perennials and bigger plants. So I'll probably double that. And I brought a hand shovel just in case. So I'm gonna try to assess and see where I have plants in the ground, where I don't. I do wanna leave this space behind me between these 2 mature trees open because I do imagine a cute little bistro set here, so yes. All right, well, let's see what this looks like. Of course, I did all this on my other video that we lost, but that is life. Oh, I remember this being hard to open. But look at this. Thank goodness I wear this awesome little fanny pack around. Got my pruners to open that up. I always garden with a bucket too, whether it's for weeds or garbage or just whatever. It's so nice to have. Okay, so they come individually wrapped, which I don't love because this is single-use plastic, but here we go. This is Hosta, the Golden Tiara variety. I'll plant these an inch deep and 24 inches apart. Looks like that. Next is Maggie Daily astilbe. There's 3 in here. I planted an inch deep, 20 inches apart, and these will get 22 inches tall. This is the pink variety. Here's the other type of hosta. This variety is called Francis Williams. They get 24 inches tall. I'll plant them an inch deep and 36 inches apart. And then finally, the amethyst astilbe. An inch deep, 20 inches apart, and they get 20 inches tall, and they have purple blooms in the summertime. So I have the astilbe back there. I may continue. There's a drift of 3 back there. I think those are red-orange, so I might continue with more astilbe back there, and then just kind of scatter the hosta throughout. I'll zoom in on one full planting, start to finish, and then we'll knock out the rest. So this weedy dirt patch looks like it could use some hosta. I have caladiums planted there and there, so we'll make sure we get enough space away. And let's take a look at how we can put these plants in the ground. I'm gonna start with my auger. I'm gonna do the Hosta Francis Williams variety, which needs 1 inch planting depth and 24 inches apart. How many did that come with? Okay, there's 6 here. right, hole is dug. Here's some Biotope starter fertilizer, just to make sure it has the nutrients it needs. Now, we don't have any compost in this area. If I wanted to, I could mix in some compost here, but hostas are pretty tough plants. Should be okay. These are just ready to take off. These have been in a dark space since we bought them, and look, they're trying to grow. You can tell because they haven't had any sunlight. There's no green growth on them yet, but they will here soon enough. So the roots are here, and the leaves are growing a little sideways. So they should straighten back up. I'm gonna make this a little deeper. Hit a little tree root there. It's not surprising. And then we'll get this in here and just kind of cover her up like that. It's not an immediate show, but it will be. Plants have genes in their DNA that tell them to grow against the force of gravity, whereas their roots grow with the force of gravity. So I have pure confidence that this will eventually straighten out. All right, let's do the rest of these hosta. How's it going? I'm running out of space on my camera card and running out of battery, so now's a good time to close out. Thank you so much for coming on this gardening journey with me. I hope you enjoy following what it is I love to do and how I'm transforming this space. This is only my second growing season on this property, and we've already made such amazing progress, if I'm allowed to say so, including in this, which is going to be my major project, that and probably the row crop garden. We've got tons of plants in here already. It's just gonna be a matter of maintenance and watching them grow. If you enjoy my work, it helps if you subscribe to my channel, like my videos, or maybe share the link to someone who you might think be interested. Thank you again for coming along this journey with me. Good luck in the garden, and see you next time.